And the clicker isn't working, so I'm going to be like working with, tell me your name again. Rochelle. Okay, so Rochelle and I are going to be a team tonight. So let's go. So when I like a subject, I talk fast. So if you find that I'm talking too fast, just raise your hand, tell me to slow down, and I'll try to slow down until I pick up again, kind of like a horse headed for the barn. So,
if you're using a microphone, that helps a lot.
Say what?
Can you make sure you're not standing too far back from the microphone?
So talk into it. Yeah, all right. And if I'm not talking so much into the microphone, let me know, okay? All right, so my dear colleague, Malcolm Margolin, who died recently, changed my life. When I moved to the Bay Area 40 years ago, Malcolm, who founded Heyday Books and wrote The Ohlone Way, was giving talks about what the Bay Area was like prior to the arrival of Europeans. He was a mesmerizing speaker, and I was captivated. And when he spoke, I would just close my eyes so I could better see the pictures he was painting with his words. So 300 years ago, the Bay Area was an amazing place. Early European explorers and settlers described it as a land of plenty. The hills and valleys were covered in grasslands dotted with magnificent oaks. The grasslands were grazed by vast herds of pronghorn antelope, which were thought to have been the most abundant big game animal in California prior to the arrival of Europeans, with a population estimated at 500,000. Pronghorn antelope have been clocked running at speeds of over 40 miles an hour. Only the cheetah is faster. So can you imagine seeing herds of pronghorn antelope racing through the grasslands right where we're sitting right now? George C. Yount wrote that Tule elk were so tame that they would hardly move to open the way for the traveler to pass. They were seen lying, grazing in immense herds on the sunny side of every hill, and their young, like lambs, were frolicking in all directions. William Heath Davis reported seeing an enormous herd of elk swimming between Mare Island and the mainland in the early 1840s. He wrote, I remember one occasion when on the schooner Isabella of sailing through a band of these elk, probably not less than 1,000, which were then crossing from Mare Island to the mainland. It was a grand and exciting scene. Badgers, bobcats, grizzly bears, and wolves roamed the East Bay. The number of birds that migrated through the Bay Area was astonishing. Settlers wrote about the almost deafening, tumultuous, and confused noises of the innumerable flocks of ducks and geese, which at times blackened the very heavens with their increasing numbers. The skies were darkened for days on end as birds in flocks of millions passed through the Bay Area. And when they landed, an early settler wrote that they covered the surface of every bay and inlet, and that when disturbed, they rose in wheeling clouds, and the flapping of their wings sounded like thunder. Swainson hawks, golden eagles, and northern harriers patrolled the skies. Condors with 9-foot wingspans soared over the oaks and grasslands, casting large shadows. They were said to be seen in great abundance. Millions of salmon ran up through the bay and into creeks and streams and rivers in the winter, spring, fall, and late fall. They were seen in such numbers it was said that a man could walk across a stream on their backs and not get his feet wet. River otter once thrived here, raising their families in marshes, bays, rivers, and creeks, and sea otters were commonly seen in the bay. It must have been a noisy place at that time. Red-legged, yellow-legged, and Pacific chorus frogs were everywhere, calling to each other noisily and splashing into creeks, ponds, and pools when startled. The Bay Area was home to groves of magnificent, stately oaks. There were coast live oaks, valley oaks, blue oaks, and black oaks. Oakland was named for the extensive oak woodland found there. Even the top of Alameda was covered with an oak forest. In the Oakland hills were redwood trees with trunks more than 30 feet in diameter, and so tall they were used as navigational aids for sailors coming through the Golden Gate so they could avoid grounding on Blossom Rock as they sailed into the bay. Wildflowers bloomed in unbelievable numbers between February and November, and the land was covered with extraordinary, enormous fields of purple lupin, chia, and owl's clover, and blue-eyed grass and lavender and aster. The hills were ablaze with red maids, pink checker blooms, and creamy popcorn flower and soap plant, and they were dense with yellow goldenrod, orange poppies, and the electric yellow blossoms of buttercups. This astonishing fecundity was fueled by native plants, which provided food, shelter, and breeding area for all the creatures I just mentioned. So while I'm on this slide, I want to tell you the story of Thomas Jefferson Mayfield. And this is told in the book Indian Summer, which is published by Heyday Press. It's out of print now, but you could maybe get it at the library. And I'm going to leave this copy of the book title right here. So if you want to look at it later and try to get it, you could. So when Thomas Jefferson Mayfield was 6, he sailed with his parents and 2 older brothers from Galveston, Texas to San Francisco. It was 1850. They took pack horses from San Francisco to San Jose, then mules from San Jose into the Central Valley. It was spring, and they saw enormous areas covered with wildflowers. He said they didn't seem to mix much, so that some of the areas would be covered in patches of color a mile or more across. The family stopped in a wildflower field, and though he said his father was not a man much given to this type of thing, they got off their mules and they decorated themselves and their pack animals with flowers. His mother cried with joy. When they set off again, she let him ride his own mule, and once he turned proudly back to look at her, and she smiled at him. And that was one of his last memories of his mother, as 6 months later she was dead. The family wound up living about an hour east of what is now Coalinga. His father was a stockman and was away a lot, and his older brothers rode with their father. After his mother died, the Indians sent a delegation of 5 or 6 women to ask if they could care for the boy. At first, Thomas stayed with them for just a few days while his father was away, but he wound up living with the Indians for 11 years. And during that time, years would go by, but he didn't see his daddy. This is the only account of a white person living with the Indians before their way of life was totally disrupted. It's really an interesting story. The reason I go into all this is that after hearing what the Bay Area was like prior to the arrival of Europeans, I felt that I wanted to take the land under my control and try to make some for the productive landscape that was destroyed to make my house and driveway and the library and grocery store and the roads that I use. So I grew up in Los Angeles in a home surrounded by lawn, perhaps like many of you. And I have enjoyed living in the Bay Area for the last 40 years, and I'm so glad I can be near places like this. This is Skyline Gardens Restoration Project, which is located in the Berkeley Hills, just south of the steam train. This restoration work was done by volunteers at a cost of about $2,000 a year. There's nothing extraordinary about this project. Non-native plants were weeded out, and the natives could then return. This photo shows what our hills and public parks and schoolyards and our gardens could look like if we just replaced non-native plants with California natives. We're justifiably worried about the climate crisis, but the reality is that even if we could stop the climate crisis today, we would still have a biodiversity crisis. Research has shown that insect populations have been reduced by nearly half in the last 40 years. And we all know that this is true. It's called the windshield phenomenon. You probably remember, it happened to me, my dad having to almost stop the car sometimes to get the bugs off the windshield. And certain products were sold, like bug remove, go away bug or something to clean the windshields. But that doesn't happen anymore. And you probably remember all the moths that would beat themselves to death on the lights that we left outside at night. That is also a thing of the past. And just since we were children, more than a quarter of our bird life has disappeared. Even common birds are now becoming rare. I have seen a dramatic decline in the number of birds and the number of species birds in my own backyard in just the last 10 years. The causes of the biodiversity crisis: loss of habitat, introduced plant species, pesticides and herbicides, bird-glass collisions, and outdoor cats. So how many of you here are familiar with Doug Tallamy? Want to raise your hand? Okay, so a lot of you, but a lot of you are not. So his talks are life-changing. And Matt, if you remind me, I'll send you a link to one of Dr. Tallamy's talks, and you guys might like to Listen to him during your 2-month break. He conveys so well why we should all be gardening with native plants. And hearing him changed the way I think about my own garden. Okay, so this is a quote from the Chickadee's Guide to Gardening, which is a brief, charming New York Times op-ed that was written by Dr. Talamy. By including native plants in our gardens, we can create life, and by using non-native plants, we can prevent it. So why not just garden with drought-tolerant plants from Australia, the Mediterranean, and, oops, go back up one, I want that kangaroo, and South Africa? It's because plants from those areas provide great habitat for animals from those areas. But we need to provide food, shelter, and nesting areas for the creatures who live near us. So tell me what this and the next few photos have in common. So, caterpillars, great day for that robin, okay, and they're all eating caterpillars. So in the Chickadee's Guide to Gardening, which I could send to you, Matt, if you remind me, and you could forward perhaps onto your members, Dr. Talamy explains that almost all birds, 96% of all bird species, must feed caterpillar to their chicks. Baby birds do not eat seeds or berries or sugar water. They need caterpillars. And bird parents must find enormous numbers of them to raise their chicks. The estimate is that it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to get one clutch of chickadees out of the nest. And then for the next 3 weeks, the parents keep feeding their chicks caterpillars even when they have left the nest. And chickadees are tiny birds, just 1/3 of an ounce. What if you want to support woodpeckers in your yard, a bird that is about 8 times heavier than a chickadee? How many caterpillars would that take? Now, here's the story on caterpillars. Caterpillars come from butterflies and moths. But butterflies and moths are very particular about the plants they can lay their eggs on. These are mostly local native plants. And this is a photo of a variable checker spot butterfly, and here are its caterpillars on the California bee plant. How's the pace? Am I going okay, people? Am I going too fast? Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. So this chart compares the ecological value to wildlife of commonly used native plants and commonly used non-native plants. And I know it's probably hard for you to see back there. It's important, but I'm going to tell you. It's important to have a high number of species of butterflies and moths that can lay eggs on a plant, as if you only have 3 or 4 species that can use it and it's a bad year for them, there's no food. But if we have a high number of species of butterflies and moths that can use a plant, it's going to be bad conditions for some, but it's going to be great conditions for others, and there will always be enough food. So on the left in green are native plants that are easy to grow and readily found in native plant nurseries. The number is the number of species of butterflies and moths that can lay eggs on that plant. You can see that the oak is really an ecological powerhouse, as 270 species of butterflies and moths can lay eggs on it. Other great plants for wildlife are hollyleaf cherry, which is useful to about 240 species of butterflies and moths. Other great plants are California lilac, lupins, manzanita, sages, goldenrod, penstemon. Doug Talamy calls these plants keystone species as they hold the ecosystem together. On the right in red are commonly used non-native plants. You can see that they have little or no ecological value. These include cotoneaster, eucalyptus, forget-me-nots, fennel, impatiens, tree of heaven, ivy, agapanthus, ice plant, periwinkle, red-hot poker, Australian tea tree, crepe myrtle, ginkgo, grass, sweet alyssum. Sometimes people say, well, I don't have native plants in my yard and I see lots of bees and butterflies in it. That's because what they're seeing are mostly honeybees, which come from Europe. And the butterflies are there because they're flower floozies, or generalists, when it comes to sipping nectar, just not when it comes to laying eggs. Whoops, so here, go back one if you would, I'm sorry, I went too fast. Here you can see cosmos, which is from South America, hot lip sage from Mexico, and pride of Madeira and lavender from Europe. These plants provide nectar, but not places on which butterflies and moths can reproduce. And the analogy I draw is, what if you and I could have all the free coffee we wanted from Starbucks, but we couldn't have babies? We would quickly have a population crash also. So you might be wondering now what the keystone species in our area are. If you go to the Bringing Back the Native Garden Tour website, you'll see the keystone species section, and it's where our Bay Area keystone species are listed. And the data used to create this list was provided by Dr. Talamy. Here are keystone species signs that you'll see in gardens on the weekend of the tour, which show a photo of the plant, a butterfly or moth that can lay eggs on it, and its caterpillar. You can see on the left the number of species of butterflies and moths that can lay eggs on that plant. Okay, so moving on, I'm finally ready to take you on a tour of my husband, Mike's, and my garden in San Pablo, and the creatures I have seen in it. There wasn't much going on ecologically when our garden was lawn, ivy, and non-native shrubs. Here's another view looking down from the top of the lot. When I bought my house in San Pablo nearly 40 years ago, the backyard looked like this, with its scruffy lawn, weird South African plants, ivy and blackberry. And I know it's hard for you to believe that I bought the house 40 years ago. I was like probably 12, 13 when I purchased it. This is my garden today. This is my kitchen window, which is looking out on the garden, so I can watch the birds and butterflies in it as I'm cooking and washing dishes. This photo was taken in March, and as we're garden friends, let me tell you that the purple is California lilac, the yellow is sheep monkeyflower, and the white in the back is cow parsnip. This is the walkway to our front door. The stairs are lined with wildflowers. The pink is Clarkia. There are also coral bells, iris, native strawberry. So this photo is from last year. My husband and I are not required to do zone 0, which means clearing all the plants away from your house within 5 feet, but we voluntarily zone 0'd, meaning we wanted to protect our house from burning embers in case of a wildflower. I thought to myself, which would I rather have? Like these nice wildflowers close to my house, or actually a house and living children in it? And so it was not a hard decision from me. Mike and I planted this coast live oak 30 years ago when we were married. Actually, 30 years ago this month we were married. And at that time it was a 6-inch tall seedling. And we planted the buckeye from a seed 27 years ago when our first child was born. So it doesn't take long, to see these like amazing changes come, to our front yard. Really, it was just the lifetime of our family. And as soon as we put the pond in, the wildlife came. So this is an aphid eater, a species of the aptly named hoverfly, which is hovering protectively near a cow parsnip. And this grasshopper is on a California fescue near our front steps. I love this picture. I think it's just so beautiful. On the left is a praying mantis, and on the right is a pregnant tree cricket. Can you see the eggs in her abdomen? And do you remember when it was common to hear crickets chirping at night? I think we're the only house on our block that has crickets. These wildflowers are Clarkia rubicunda, a local native Clarkia to my area. On the right, you can see where the leafcutter bees have taken half moon-shaped bites out of the leaves, and they use them to make nests for their young. So I love to see that the leaves in my garden are being eaten, as that's what's supposed to happen in a garden. Here are 2 dragonflies in the pond. On the left is a green darner, which is laying eggs, and on the right is a skimmer. And of course, being a Doug Talamy groupie, it's wonderful to see caterpillars in the garden. Here are 2 geometrid moth caterpillars on goldenrod. These are called loopers or inchworms, as they have just little tiny legs on the front and back. So in order to move, they have to stand up straight and bend over and then bring their other half up behind them. These are 3 unknown caterpillars on the unfortunately named hedge nettle because it does not sting, and an Anna's swallowtail caterpillar on cow parsnip. So you don't need to plant invasive fennel for the Anna's swallowtail. There are many native plants it will lay its eggs on. Here are 3 unknown but exciting finds, and I just love that little caterpillar in the right that is sleeping in the wood chips. And this is a gray hair-streaked butterfly perching on some fescue, and this is its caterpillar on cow parsnip. So this was my first caterpillar photo, and it was really thrilling to see in my garden. I was out patrolling, hoping I would see like something, anything with my camera, and I saw this little pink thing, and I thought it was a petal from my neighbor's plum tree, but then it moved a little bit, and I got my camera. Okay, and these are plants that the gray hair streak can lay its eggs on. So this is a generalist when it comes to reproduction, meaning it will lay its eggs on a lot of plant, including the California buckwheat on the left, the California lilac on the upper right, and the rosy buckwheat on the bottom right. And the last couple of years, I have seen a lot of field crescent butterflies in my garden. The field crescent can lay its eggs on aster and goldenrod. It was exciting to find a field crescent caterpillar on the aster, and here's a field crescent butterfly perched on a Gilia, which is a wildflower. It's just super hardy, and it grows up between the cracks in our flagstone path. And this really showed me the importance of leaving the leaves. So I was in the backyard with a friend. We were digging up some aster for her to take to put into a park, and we found this very small dried aster leaf. Like, it's not even a half-inch tall. It's curled up like a C. And on it were two chrysalises. One was on the inside of the curl, and the other was on the outside. And after seeing that, I realized that in the past I have composted mini butterflies and moths. So now I leave everything in my garden, the leaves, the dried flower heads, the dried stalks. This orange mint butterfly was the first moth I photographed. It was very exciting. I saw it flying back and forth and landing on coyote mint, which is on the left, and I realized it was laying its eggs. This umber skipper, or burr marigold, is a pond plant. The burr marigold has large yellow flowers. It blooms in September and brightens the garden in the fall. This American lady butterfly is on a buckwheat flower, and a sagebrush and mugwort are both plants this butterfly can lay its eggs on, which is probably why this butterfly was in my garden. And this is a mugwort flower. This is a common checkered skipper. This was a hard photograph to get because common checkered skippers don't light in one place long. In my garden are a number of checkerboom plants, which is a plant this skipper can lay its eggs on. And today I saw one on the checkerbloom plant going back and forth, and I went out and looked for eggs. I didn't see them, but I bet it was laying eggs on that checkerbloom. I was delighted when I planted our local narrowleaf milkweed to have milkweed bugs appear in our garden. So I don't know what milkweed bugs do, but it was the first time I planted something and a thing came because of it. So that was very exciting. So this is our monarch story. This is a monarch caterpillar on narrowleaf milkweed, and of course there's that amazing monarch chrysalis, and this one to me looks very ET-like, doesn't it? So, we'll go on. This chrysalis was attached to a chair cushion, and it's turning black, and the translucence means that the butterfly is getting ready to emerge. And the blurry photo on the right is, I've been going back and forth watching it like all morning, knowing like today it's gonna happen, now it's gonna happen anyway. But I have a job to do. I put on a garden tour, so I was like, kept going to my computer, and then I went back and I was like, oh my God, it was hatching. So I ran from my camera, and that was how I got the blurry photo. But then I calmed down and got some better pictures. So when the monarch has emerged, it spends hours in the sun pumping fluid from its abdomen into its wings to stiffen them. So the native plants brought in the insects, and the insects brought in the birds. Our lot is 5,000 square feet, so it's not really big. But since Mike and I converted our garden, we've seen more than 20 species of butterflies, skippers, and moths, and 44 species of birds in our San Pablo garden. And that's why I was so thrilled yesterday to see that red-shouldered hawk perched in our garden. Like, I've seen them flying overhead, but I've never seen one perched like in our garden before, just looking around. So I'm gonna say I am not an amazing naturalist. I don't know what these creatures are. I take photos and I post them on iNaturalist, and they're crack volunteers there ID them for me. And that's how I know that. Okay, you guys know. So what's the yellowbird? What are we seeing in these pictures? Townsend's warbler, and then the woodpecker. Can you tell? Nettles, woodpecker, chickadees, which have nested in our garden. And this is a loving pair of mourning doves, which mate for life. And the mourning doves are so beautiful, and we have a lot of them around our house. I thought I would just include this extra photo. On the upper left is a Western tanager. It's in our buckeye. So this picture was taken on the morning of the virtual tour. For 6 years, starting during COVID, I put on a virtual tour, and we were just about to start. It's kind of a tense moment, and then I looked up from my window and I saw this tanager right outside of my window in the buckeye. It seemed like an auspicious sign. On the right is a yellow warbler that was migrating through and stopped in for some insects and fresh water. On the bottom left is a flicker, and on the right, of course, a robin. On the upper left is a hooded oriole. Upper right, who can tell me? Nuthatch, yes, red-breasted nuthatch. And then we have goldfinch and bush tits and hummingbird, spotted towhee. So titmice have nested in our garden for the last 2 years. It was fun watching the busy parents going back and forth all day, feeding their chicks. And bush tits have nested in the virgin's bower twice, once right outside of our kitchen window and once outside of a bedroom window, where it was also this super fun watching the parents. And here's a dove, which is, they're not too bright, nesting on our outdoor lights. But the garden isn't only for birds and bugs. My husband and I enjoy it for many reasons. And so you might be wondering now, thinking about the connection between birds and caterpillars and butterflies and native plants, what can you do to help the environment? And there are a number of things, and they are so easy, and I'm going to go through them now. So you can plant native plants. Shoot for natives, 70% by cover. That's what research has shown, that's what's needed in order for there to be enough birds to successfully reproduce. When there's less than, why don't you go to the next slide? Let's see, yeah. When there is less than 70% native plants by cover, there's not enough food for the birds, so there are fewer eggs. The chicks have lower birth weights, and there's higher mortality. So choose as many of the keystone species as you can, because they are the most ecologically valuable plants, and use our local native plants, because that's what our wildlife are looking for. The easiest way to do this is to hire a designer who specializes in designing native plant gardens. This will cost you some money up front, but you'll save a lot of money in the long run in doing the job right the first time, and you'll have a more beautiful garden if an expert helps you. So here's the Find a Designer list, which is on the Garden Tours website. And if you look under a person's name, you'll see a portfolio of the gardens they have designed that have been on the tour. So you might find somebody's style that really works for you. But if you're kind of stuck and don't know what to do, feel free and call me. If you go to Contact Me, that's my home phone number, my personal email. You can contact me anytime. I'm happy to talk about designers with you. If you want a native plant garden and you're hiring a designer, it's important to hire someone who specializes in creating native plant gardens. Designers used to designing with non-native plants are likely to give you a garden filled with the plants that they're familiar with. You can see the keystone species listed on the website so that you can choose the plants with the most ecological value. Provide a source of clean water for birds and wildlife. So the Bay Area used to be a place of many streams and seeps. Berkeley was called the City of Springs in the early days of European settlement, as every time somebody put a shovel in the ground, water shot up. If you look around now, you can imagine how hard it is for today's wildlife to find a clean source of water. This pond on the left is in Roger and Amy Ains' garden in Livermore, and they photographed this fox drinking from their pond. But even a bird bath will draw in birds. To keep your bird bath fresh, just rinse and scrub it frequently. The American Bird Conservancy says to skip the synthetic soaps and cleansers, as they can strip the essential oils off of bird feathers. Refill the water every other day to keep it fresh. Leave the leaves and the twigs and the stems. And this one is so easy because you just do less. Sometimes butterflies attach the chrysalises to stems, like the one on the left, but more often, their pupa looks like the one on the right. You've probably seen them in your yard. I know I was so puzzled by them for a long time, like, what does that little brown thing in the soil? The pupas drop down and they're hidden in leaves or just barely underground, where they remain from months to a year. And they need leaf litter to shelter under Finally, the butterfly or moth will emerge as an adult. So I took the photo on the left in my front garden recently under the oak. So the leaves keep weeds from sprouting, so I have little weeding to do. The leaves keep the soil moist, so I don't water. The leaves decompose and enrich the soil. They also provide shelter to the butterfly and moth pupa that are spending the winter buried underneath them. When leaves fall in the driveway, I sweep them up and I put them in the garden. Leaves are a valuable resource. These days, I would no more put leaves in the green waste bin than I would put dollar bills in the green waste bin. It's important when you look at your garden, try to think like a bird or a bee. We think, oh, that flower is spent. It's time to cut it back. But a bird thinks, wow, there's a lot of seeds in there. And I've seen birds on my Clarkia stems so much later than I would have thought there would be anything left in them. But Clarkia are really interesting. They have this long flower thing that's left over, and that opens a little at a time. They drop their seeds a tiny bit at a time. So the seeds are there for a long while for the birds, longer than we think they would be. And also remember, there's this entire tiny world that exists in our gardens that we aren't even aware of. For example, native bees lay their eggs in the hollow stems of plants, as you can see in the bottom photo. So if we cut the stems down, we're throwing away baby bees. On the upper right are male longhorn bachelor bees, and they're having a slumber party on the dried flower heads of this native flower. And I think it is just so adorable that they gather together to sleep with their friends. After I heard that these bees sleep on dried flower heads, I have not been able to cut back any of my spent flower heads, because it gives me more pleasure knowing that my garden is a haven for wildlife than it would to keep it manicured. And I see so many more butterflies and moths than I used to. You can advocate for natives to your city staff, elected officials, to schools. So they're on the Garden Tours website. Let me see here. So I'm showing these photos because Assembly Bill 1572 is coming up. How many of you are familiar with Assembly Bill 1572? Okay, a couple, and I'm so happy that I get to tell the rest of you about it because it's really exciting. And I have this information on Assembly Bill 1572. If somebody wants to bring it home or make copies, I'm going to put it right here. Okay. So Assembly Bill 1572 will fundamentally change the way California looks. And it provides a fabulous opportunity to create habitat for wildlife in what have been ecological dead zones. So Assembly Bill 1572 was signed into law in the fall of 2023 by Governor Newsom. Let me tell you first what it doesn't apply to. Assembly Bill 1572 does not apply to single-family homes, and it does not apply to functional turf. And functional turf is turf that's used, like soccer fields, or where you go and you stand, on the lawn, maybe here at Heather Farms, and get married, or students sprawl on it on the UC Berkeley campus between classes. That turf is being used, and it's functional turf. But non-functional turf is just decorative lawn that isn't used for any real purpose at schools, HOAs, libraries, universities, and so on. So this presents a fabulous opportunity to create native gardens for wildlife. And it's just getting so dark in here. So starting January 1, so coming right up, the law applies to all city, county, and state-owned land. So Alan Bidet and others who are interested in advocating for native plants to your city officials, or if you have children or grandchildren that are at a school that's got those big lawns in front, it will be illegal to water those starting January 1st. Public schools and public universities, parks and community centers, libraries, museums, art galleries, historical landmarks, police and fire stations, and government offices that have landscaped areas are the first ones who will need to comply with Assembly Bill 1572. Let me say also that the new plantings can be watered, so it isn't that like no water can be applied, it's just going to be illegal to continue to water lawn. And existing trees can be watered. Okay, and so the decision makers, they could put in black and white rocks and cow horns or wood chips or non-native plants, but they could also take this opportunity to make good decisions and create habitat for wildlife so that we could all see more birds right where we live. The next year, January 1st, 2028, the law will apply to all businesses, private schools, private universities, all religious institutions, private hospitals. The next year, January 1, 2029, people at Rossmore, that's when you fall into it. So all HOAs. So this is not, functional area that people picnic on. It's the spaces that you walk past that are just there for decoration. Okay, so a lot of people are not aware about the deadlines for Assembly Bill 1572. And if you go on the Garden Tours website, if you want to talk to me about it, there's a very nice summary of 1572 and photographs of schools, libraries, businesses, civic centers that have already converted their gardens to native plant gardens. Okay, and in response to any comments that people might have that native gardens are too much work or they're too expensive, you can refer them to this study, which is also conveniently on the Garden Tours website. This is a 9-year-long study that was conducted by the city of Santa Monica, and it compared a traditional garden with lawn and Mediterranean plants to a native plant garden, and found that the native plant garden used only 20% of the water, generated less than half of the green waste, and of course that's a labor savings, and required 70% less time to maintain than the traditional garden did. You can also put screens up or treat your windows to prevent bird glass collisions. So you may know that bird glass collisions are thought to cause 1 billion bird deaths in the United States every year. And half of those collisions occur on low buildings, like our houses. Note that the window treatments have to be applied to the outside of the window to break up the reflection. It doesn't do any good to draw your screen or drop a blind because the reflection is still there and birds think they can fly through the glass. Also, birds are really good flyers. So just putting up the occasional sticker doesn't work. Really, the markers need to be 2 inches by 2 inches apart so the bird thinks, okay, I'm not even going to try to fly through there. So let's see here. So research, you might think, well, birds don't hit my windows, but research shows that people only notice like 1 out of every 15 or something collisions that happen on their windows. We're not at home, we're not in the room where it happens. Sometimes the bird, dies right away and it drops down to the ground, but sometimes they stagger off and they die elsewhere. Or animals take their bodies away. So we really don't realize, what an effect our own gardens are having. Birds that hit windows likely die. So the top row of pictures were taken in my own home. On the left are double-hung windows with screens. And we chose double-hung windows instead of casement windows specifically because we could put screens on them. In the center, we have kaleidoscope screening on our big picture window, and it's been up for 6 years now and is adhering just fine. On the upper right are my kitchen windows, which were treated with feather-friendly markers. And ever since we treated the windows in our house, we have not had a single bird glass collision. On the bottom row, on the left, are Acopian blinds. This is really parachute cord that just hangs down every 4 inches apart. And in this case, 4 inches works to alert birds. In the center is a custom screen. And the person who has that screen said they love it because their bird bath is right outside the screen. And before, when they were at that door, the birds could see them inside and they would, be disturbed. But now the birds can't see them inside, but they can see out and they get to see a lot more, natural activity happening in their bird bath. And in the center, on the right, is a free-form art done with a China marker or a grease pen. You can eliminate pesticide and herbicide use. Pesticides kill insects and wildlife by poisoning them, eliminating their food sources, and destroying their habitat. And their effect is felt far beyond the target species, impacting butterflies, native bees, raptors. Examples of pesticides' health impacts on humans are cancers, birth defects, reproductive harm, and more. Okay, so here are some tour gardens from East Contra Costa County. So none of these gardens use any pesticides or herbicides. These photos were taken in Walnut Creek, Concord, Orinda, Clayton. And you can see how beautiful these gardens are. And if you choose the right plants, you can have beautiful gardens without harming wildlife and while protecting your and your family's health. These photos were taken in Lafayette, Martinez, and in Clayton. Can buy organic produce so your food choices are not poisoning wildlife and farm workers elsewhere, and you and your family are not consuming pesticides. So you love cats and I love cats, but cats kill birds, billions of them every year in North America. If you can, keep your cat indoors. If you can't keep your cat indoors, then keep it in as much as you can. And the next time you get a kitten, train it right from the beginning and keep it indoors. I'm going to finish by showing you some photos from Susan Teefe's garden in Castro Valley and the birds she has seen in her garden. So Susan and her husband had lawn for many years, and Susan became a native plant gardener because she was passionate about birds. And since she and her husband converted their lawn into this beautiful haven for wildlife, they have seen 72 species of birds in their garden. Her garden is on the tour, and for the last 3 years, on the day of the tour, oak titmice have been nesting in the garden. Nuthatches, woodpeckers, chickadees, and titmice have also nested in their garden. And she sees a lot of hummingbirds and okay birders. I know you're probably getting sleepy and I'm almost done. Why don't you tell me what we're seeing here? Okay, and let's go on. So Wilson's warbler, western bluebird, and she said the spotted towhee was photobombing the picture. And this one here, Bewick's wren, cedar waxwing, spotted towhees nested in their garden this year under the manzanitas. And this Townsend's warbler. So I can't tell you what a pleasure and joy it is to garden for birds. You don't have to leave home to be in nature, and by gardening for birds, you can help turn around their declining numbers. So I want to close by saying native gardens are beautiful, low maintenance, they require little to no water once established, and it is so fun and so satisfying to bring nature home to your own backyard. So I hope after hearing this talk, you'll take the Marie Kondo approach to your garden. If you have plants in your garden that you love, your mother gave it to you, or the scent of lavender reminds you of that fabulous time you had in Paris a long time ago, then keep it. But if what you have in your garden are lawn, camellias, agapanthus, and other non-native plants that you don't love, then consider replacing them with natives that will provide habitat for wildlife. Delta Diablo Bird Alliance, thank you so much for having me.